Hello, and welcome to episode 12 of Intercultural Insiders. My name is John McGraw, and I help expats and newcomers feel confident in their new country in less time and pain. I'm the founder of Hyaku Coaching, which is dedicated to helping you create your pathway to success in a new culture. The purpose of Intercultural Insiders is to share the stories of people with intercultural experiences. So if you're feeling isolated or lost, perhaps you can hear something from the guests' experiences that could help you, even if it's just a reminder that you're not alone. And today is going to be quite interesting because I have two guests today, Kennedy Kao and Tomo Nogi, filmmakers and creators of the upcoming film Good Boy. And they'll be, of course, showing the interview shortly. But as usual, I have some announcements to make. And in this case, one particular one that should be quite interesting to people who want to adapt to work culture and life here in Canada. I am planning a 3-session live online cohort based course called Newcomers Build Great Relationships with Canadian Colleagues and Clients. It's going to be on Maven, which is a learning platform based around live cohorts. There is a link to a survey and waitlist for the course, which I will also show in the chat a little bit later. I'll share that on the LinkedIn chat as well as the YouTube chat. And this course is for newcomers who are looking to strengthen their cross-cultural skills so they can thrive in positions and advance in their careers. So we'll cover topics like understanding key aspects of Canadian work culture, advocating for yourself in a Canadian workplace, and building relationships to thrive in your position and advance in your career. I've run workshops on this theme for organizations like BMG, Brilliant Minds Group, and I've worked with immigrants and newcomers one-to-one to help them adapt to Canadian business culture. And now I'm looking to share this knowledge with a wider audience. So if you know someone who could benefit from this course, I encourage you to let them know about the course. Again, I will put some more information about this in the chat. And if you know someone who might be interested, they can, of course, reach out to me on LinkedIn or through my email, which again, I will share in the chat. So I'm happy to share more information as it develops. So with that said, as I said earlier, we've got an interview with Tomo Nogi and Kennedy Kao, who are filmmakers and creators of the upcoming project Good Boy, which I have a real interest in because I have a long interest in film, and obviously I have an interest in culture. And this film takes both together. It's about a Japanese university student in Toronto trying to fit in and find himself. And the idea of the project really resonates with me. And I think it will resonate with anyone who has experienced loneliness and isolation. And of course, we'll get more into this into the interview today. And as you know, this interview is pre-recorded. But the good thing is that Tomo and Ken will be joining us in the chat, I believe in LinkedIn Live and also on YouTube. So there's plenty of opportunity to ask questions, to comment on the interview, find out more about the film. And the film is going to be going into production, into actual filming soon. So there are opportunities to fund the project. They already have some funding for that, but there's more funding necessary to make this project complete. So there's more information available for that at goodboyfilmproduction.com, which the link is shared already in the description of this event, but I will also share it in the chat as well. So in today's interview, we talk about what inspired Kennedy and Tomo to make Good Boy, the expectations put on men in various cultures and the importance of forgiveness for yourself when adapting to a new culture. So, as I said, both Kennedy and Tomo will be available in the chat, so feel free to write comments throughout the interview and ask your questions to make this a lively experience. So, without further ado, let's get into the interview with Tomo and Ken. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Intercultural Insiders. And as you can see from the screen, it's a bit unusual because I don't have just one guest, but I have, in fact, two, Kennedy, Kao and Tomo Nogi, who are accomplished filmmakers. And they're here not only to talk about their experiences, but also about a really fascinating film that they're working on that ties into what I'm passionate about, which is adapting to other cultures. Before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Yeah, sure thing. So I guess I'll start off. Yeah, so I'm Kennedy. I've been directing and making films for about 6-7 years now, and tend to focus on films that are about the Asian Canadian community, the Asian diaspora in North America. And for this film that we're going to talk about today, it's called Good Boy. It's been a personal project of mine for a while, and looking forward to talking about the film and my personal experiences that sparked this film.
Hi, my name is Tomo. I'm originally from Japan, came to Canada in 2018 as a photographer and videographer. Just wanted to see how far I can go as a freelancer. And I met Ken in one of the networking events for film industry. And we've been working since then, time to time. We've done some wedding videography, we've done music video, we've done short films. And one thing I really like about Ken's work is that he's bringing communities together, particularly young filmmakers. And it's becoming a movement for new upcoming filmmakers. So that's one of the big reasons why I decided to support and participate in this production, Good Boy.
I'm always excited to hear about movies and about the film industry. I wanted to just talk a little bit about how we actually got connected in the first place. Why don't you tell us about it from your perspective?
Yeah, we met you at a networking event. So it seems like these networking events really bring people together, but I believe the networking event that we all attended was for Japanese professionals and Canadian professionals to mingle and network. And Tomo and I, we were looking to promote the film and network ourselves. And we met you, John, serendipitously, like right as the event was about to end in the elevator room.
Exactly.
And we talked about our film, and you talked about your business and your coaching career, and instantly struck a chord. And yeah, that was really exciting to hear about your business and what you do to help people adapt to new cultures, new environments, and connection was made.
Some of the viewers might know that many years ago, I made an attempt at an acting career. So the fact that we met there and connecting with the film side and with the culture side of Good Boy and how that connects with feeling out of place and adapting. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the film itself and what the idea is behind it?
Yeah, definitely. I guess I can just sum it up by saying it's about a Japanese international student studying at the University of Toronto who basically just struggles to make connections, struggles to find friends, find love, even just find a community to belong. I tend to make films that are character-based. I basically like to frame my interest in filmmaking as following a character throughout the whole film, watching his or her behaviors, anything that happens to the character, and seeing how they react to any kind of external event. And it's definitely a film about someone trying to belong, trying to fit in, trying to find themselves.
I went to the GoFundMe page for the film, and I watched the teaser that introduces Shinji and introduces the other key characters. And having gone through that experience myself, being a Canadian in Japan, I could sense what he was going through, even though there wasn't anything that was really overstated. You could get a sense of what was going on inside. What was it that motivated you guys to make a film like this?
I can start by saying that I attended the University of Toronto. I'm doing this interview from U of T. So very closely related to U of T and U of T culture. And while attending U of T, I had a lot of international student friends and just talking to them and hearing just how lonely they were, missing family, missing friends from back home, and how much of a struggle that was for them. I definitely noted that, right? I definitely logged that. And perhaps like back then I wanted to make a film about that experience, and now we're doing that. But speaking about how I personally connect to this film, aside from having friends that have gone through a similar experience, I like to say that there's a loneliness epidemic that is out there, whether through COVID, whether through technology kind of making everyone a bit more isolated. I think it's definitely something that I feel and that I see around me, right? Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, I just want to really depict a character who is trying to confront their loneliness, right? And trying to figure out how to make connections. What is it like to make connections in this environment, in this world? That's really what inspired me to make the film. Maybe Tomo, you can explain what inspired you to jump on board?
No, I remember you talking about that loneliness or the distance, social distance between people, especially in Toronto University. But that was like 2 or 3 years ago. We were working on something else. And I remember Ken saying, oh, it's weird that it's hard to make friends here because there are so many people crashing in. But it's hard for people to actually connect. And I witnessed and felt the similar things in Tokyo as well. There are literally so many people packed in a train commuting to work, but there's like invisible, infinite distance that it's hard to fill in. In the beginning, I was thinking it's just probably just like a big city thing. People tend to be that way. And then this project came in and started talking about this project and having a shape about dealing loneliness. And I had an experience to revisit that conversation in my head. It goes into what John just mentioned earlier when he watched our short film. Nothing catastrophic happens, but more like senses. It's a lot about how do we sense about each other. That kind of nuanced texture or touch or craft is something that attracted me to this production.
And as you said, it's not just people who are feeling isolated because they're in another country, but people who are isolated wherever they are because of as you said, the loneliness epidemic. I think it's something that we can all identify with, even if we haven't necessarily moved to another country. And if you don't mind me bringing this up, Tom, I remember that when we had another meeting, you talked a little bit about your experiences studying abroad first time in New Zealand.
Yes, I did study in university in New Zealand. And I was there for 4 or 5 years. I made many friends from different countries, and that experience made it easier for me to break into the communities in Toronto when I came to Canada. But I also saw and felt for myself that people having difficulty to connect with people. Like loneliness was definitely there, and I was also feeling lonely sometimes. And I was always afraid of being in the situation to be lonely, so I always try to avoid the situation itself. Yeah, the simple loneliness itself seems to be very just connect or make friends. Nothing extraordinary, but sometimes it can be super hard for some reason. I guess as an immigrant, it sometimes is difficult for me to get into the local community because they already know, they already have their own topic, they already know what they're talking about, and I don't really follow up their recent news, sports, or political events, or even comedians. And they think also that they don't have much in common to talk to me about. Fortunately, we had anime as a common topic, or just food. I've been quite fortunate about it, but it taught me a lot that I gotta pay extra effort to get in there and have a conversation. But that can be tiring too.
I can appreciate how that can be difficult. And we say, oh, just go ahead and just talk to somebody, just connect. And it's easy to say, but depending on where the person is, that can seem like a real mountain to climb. And I think if we have the sense that it's not just us, we're not the only one who feels that way, then I think that can make it a little bit easier. Would you say that ties into another reason why you guys chose to make this film?
When we had our conversation over dinner, I think you poignantly brought up a lot of anecdotes about people struggling to fit into a new environment, a new culture. And I think something that really struck me during that dinner was how it is a kind of personal battle that one has to overcome to initiate that conversation. Because Tomo, like you said, when you're in a new environment, there's a whole national cultural context that you are not familiar with. And sure, it definitely does help to maybe study or do your research on what that cultural context is. But it does come from a place of self-confidence, right? Of self-belief, of trusting yourself to go with the flow, to trust your instincts and just trust your kind of natural ability to connect with someone, right? We all have this kind of desire and this ability to talk to people, right? And initiating that is tricky, but at the end of the day, it leads to great things, right? It's definitely like interwoven within the film, right? For me personally, there are many reasons why I choose to make a film. And that reason is definitely embedded in the film, for sure.
If I may add just one thing, is also about being self-confident. It's also about forgiving yourself too. It's okay. I've tried a bit today. You don't have to talk to every single person in the train. Really stressful thing to do for everyone. And that's also part of being confident too. Like, it's okay. You gotta get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, like giving yourself the benefit of the doubt, right? When things are, let's say, lost in translation, that's totally fine, right?
I think so, because it's communication, right? It's a two-way thing. It's not only about you. It also could be something for someone else. Maybe that person is not in the mood or didn't understand my accent, but I've been trying to improve it. But also, sure, I can improve it, but also that depends on that person, that listening ability too. And that could also be an element of forgiveness. I shouldn't be too hard on myself. That if in general I can talk to people, I'm not having much trouble, then I'm probably warranted to forgive myself a bit. Yeah, that kind of forgiveness.
I think that both of you guys have really explained it very well, that idea that getting out there, and as you said, communication is a two-way street. It shouldn't all be dependent on one person doing everything. Making the adjustment, as you said, Tomo, for yourself, working on your accent so that it's easier for people who are not used to a Japanese accent to understand you, for example. But it also depends on if the person is receptive. And particularly in a city such as Toronto, with such a mixture of different accents and backgrounds, you should be open to being more receptive and taking more time to listen. And I think that's something as a world, and particularly Canada, as a country where immigration is such a major part right now, with that announcement from the federal government of taking in 450,000 immigrants and planning to increase that to 500,000, that if we want to succeed on the global stage, that is something that we need to be open of as a society. So it's not all just dependent on, okay, people who are coming here, they have to develop a Canadian accent. I just think from a societal aspect, we can go much farther together if we are open to each other and accept that. As you both said, being forgiving of yourself.
It's a tricky thing because it's a catchball, essentially. You want to train yourself to be able to throw a good ball to someone else. And that's maybe my accent, the way I maybe speak in general, so that the ball actually travels to that person. And you have to also pay attention to the timing when you throw a ball. Like he or she might be somewhere else. You don't want to throw the ball. But for this movie, though, main character, his name is Shinji. He speaks fine. He can actually connect. There's something not enough. That's something that attracted me again to this production project. That nuanced kind of sense.
If I may branch off of that, Tomo is right. The character in our film speaks English perfectly well, but the disconnect perhaps is more about how he wants or chooses to present himself. How in Western culture, guys, men are expected to act a certain way, which is completely different to how men are expected to act in the Eastern part of the world and specifically Japan. But there's an element there to Shinji where he's really not sure how to act. While he speaks fluent English, maybe he is looking to pick up certain slang words or certain behavioral cues. And we really see that in the film, him wrestling with that, whether or not that's something he should even do. And again, it all ties back to what it's like to really be who you are. Our kind of cultural influences, whether we like it or not, can influence our personalities and how we choose to act. That's, I guess, the core of his disconnect, his Western surroundings.
Just to branch off again, this film is not really like a criticism to the Western way of behavior. Again, it's very subtle. It's not even bringing up the Eastern way either, not clearly. So it's really about what do you think? It's not really like Western way bad. It's not like that.
Yeah, we're certainly not looking to negatively portray or negatively comment on Western ways of living or Eastern ways of living. It's just the reality of someone trying to assimilate to a new continent. There are these cultural kind of values and ideals that they have to weigh and that they have to confront. I think our jobs as filmmakers is not necessarily to give statements, but to just observe and just to depict, to show a sort of reality for them to maybe come to their own conclusions and for them to come to their own interpretations.
And I really appreciate that because everyone's journey is going to be different in some ways. And I think you're absolutely right about that commonality of trying to adapt to another circumstances. You want to be accepted, right? You're looking for that acceptance, as I'm sure Shinji is, and I'm sure we all have at different points in our life. And yeah, you do get to that point of, okay, how much do I change? And there's a real identity crisis. And I'm sure that we've all gone through it in different situations, even if just where you're growing up, when you go into your adolescence, you want to fit in with everybody else. And how do I adjust? What's the real me? So I appreciate you taking that stance and just saying, okay, this is what we see. What's your answer from that?
I think at the end of the day, films incite conversation. At least films that I like, they spark conversation. They make us realize certain things about the society, about ourselves that we didn't realize before. And because film is such a communal experience, films obviously are mainly shown in theaters, where it's a perfect opportunity to inspire conversation, right? Thank you, John, for acknowledging our decision to go that route, because it's a route I think that we're proud of taking, because film is such a powerful medium nowadays, and it's mainly an entertainment tool, but it's also a tool for bringing people together for discussion, especially for important topics.
Yeah, the stance of this film is this is what's happening to Shinji, the character, not to everybody, but to Shinji, this is what's happening.
All right. And there is a second part, of course, of the interview coming up. So the ending might have seemed a little bit abrupt there, but don't worry, there is more coming up next week, as we know, in the next episode of Intercultural Insiders Part 2. We'll talk about that. But in the meantime, I'd like to spend a little bit of time, give you some time to digest. If you have many questions or comments for Tomo or Ken about the film, they are, as you can see from your watching, they're both in the chat in YouTube and LinkedIn. So this is a great opportunity to learn about more about it. And just a reminder, of course, that if you to learn more about the film and learn opportunities to film it, such as the GoFundMe page, the short film that was mentioned as a companion piece to the upcoming main film, you can go to Good Boy Film Production to find out more information about the film and to get to the website there, see about this, the main character Shinji, learn more about the funding opportunities and what the story is about, to see the short companion piece. So I encourage you to go there to find out more. And there were some interesting comments that showed a little bit earlier. An interesting point from Toronto English School, from Joseph Petosa at Toronto English School, head of Toronto English School, mentioning about connecting with people. I've taught English to many Japanese people who try to connect by using slang, probably because they're not sure how else to do it. And that is a very interesting point, I think, as well. Oh, and I can see also that Tomo has just responded to that. So Toronto English School, I can see that being one of the starting points. When we learn a new language, we are like babies. The semantics of slang often can be something relatable to their lives, perhaps. Yeah, I think that those are both excellent points. I have my own experiences. Well, I think most of us, after we spend a little bit of time learning a language, we often want to learn maybe the so-called authentic way that people speak it. And I picked up a couple of Japanese slang words. I think it's, and in one way, my own opinion, that can be a great way to connect. But then the tricky thing when it comes to slang and how it connects to culture is, of course, there can be different slang based on various cultures, maybe the part of the country that you're in, or also the generation that you come from. Well, speaking as a Gen Xer, as an English speaker, there's a lot of new slang that comes up from say millennials or Generation Y that I have no idea about, and this was something sometimes that when I was teaching English that I would run into because I would have younger students asking me about slang, and it's like, well, I can only give you my perspective as someone from Generation X because there's a lot of things that I may not connect to because it's not part of my generational culture. And that is actually something that we get talking a little bit about in part 2 as well. So, yeah, interesting. Thank you for bringing all of that up, Joseph at Toronto English School, and also Tomo. And let's see. Of course, I also mentioned earlier the course that I will be running for newcomers about building great relationships with Canadian colleagues and clients. I did drop information for that in the chats for both LinkedIn and YouTube, along with relevant links. So you can find out more about that. And if you know someone who is interested, to share that information with them. If you are interested yourself, there is a link to a survey and a wait list so you can get in early and share your thoughts and opinions about what you'd like to learn and get on that wait list so you'll be there for all of the announcements about when the course launches and everything else and the pricing and all of that. So, getting back to the film, again, I'm very excited. I think filming is going to be starting in February, if I'm correct. And again, Tomo and Ken, you can feel free to comment on this as well in the chat. So there is lots of opportunity to get involved. So I from what I've seen, I really encourage you to watch the short companion piece on the website to get a feel, because that really, really made an impression on me, as I mentioned in the interview, about this project and about the possibilities and why it grabbed my attention. And again, if you have that experience, yes, and of course, Kennedy's confirming it. February is launching. So yeah, and I believe they're also looking for people in Toronto to serve at different as extras in some of the filming, if I'm not mistaken, particularly for those who have who can speak Japanese or Japanese background. So if you are in Toronto or can get to Toronto easily enough and you're Japanese, there's an opportunity there to star in a film or to make an appearance in a film. So I encourage you to, of course, reach out to Tomo and Ken about that. And again, that link is goodboyfilmproduction.com to find out more about that. And of course, to find out more about Hyaku coaching and what I do, you can go to thriveglobally.ca to find out more, schedule a one-to-one discovery call with me for free to learn more about that and help you find ways that you can adapt to other cultures, including Canadian culture. But that, I think, comes to the end. This brings us up to the end of our episode for part 1. And I wanted to highlight, of course, we've got part 2 with the interview with Tomo and Ken coming up next on Wednesday, February 1st at the usual time, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'd like to remind you that the audio version of this interview will be coming out in podcast form on most major podcast platforms, including Spotify, Anchor, and Apple Podcasts. So you can look for Intercultural Insiders, subscribe there, leave a review if you're in. And of course, reviews help to raise awareness about the podcast, but that will drop on Monday. So next week, Wednesday, February 1st, part 2 of the interview, where we'll discuss more about our different cross-cultural experiences because we ask questions to each other, and the experiences that Kennedy has of working with Tomo, a Japanese producer, and Japanese actors in a film where they speak in Japanese as well as English, and talking a little bit more about filmmaking culture and leadership styles and how they relate to corporate culture. So I encourage you to tune in for that. And until then, keep navigating your way between cultures towards your goals.